Hi, my name's Stephanie Pichet, and I'm the executive producer of Red Carpet Reports, a series for Santa Fe Film Festival, where we're talking to filmmakers for this year's festival about their entry. And we have today Reinhard Lorenz, who has the film How COVID Inspires Change. He's going to talk to us a little bit about that. So, greetings and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for having me, Stephanie. This is great. My name is Reinhard Lorenz. I'm a filmmaker, producer, also educator, born and raised in Germany, worked in Berlin for a long time before I made the interesting move to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and have been here for about 12 years, starting out in education, actually. So I work with UNM as a film instructor, and from there worked sort of my way into the industry. I have a production company called First Eye Films, who is both sort of a development hub for new content and a service provider working in the line producing production management area for productions that come to New Mexico. And a thing that I love to do is documentary. I don't get to do enough of it, but I was fortunate enough last year when the pandemic started to be involved with a small, shall we say, collective of creative filmmakers that my producer friend Brandon Morris initiated. And his idea was, well, here we are not being able to work. So what are we going to do instead of saying we can't do anything? So it was the idea of creating a collaborative collective of shorts that would tackle in creative ways the pandemic and stories that come out of it. So that was a collaboration that mostly happened between March. Well, the idea started in March, and then we actually worked between April and June, and that resulted in that collaborative project that I'm also of course, highly promoting here. It's out there. It's not in the Santa Fe Film Festival, but it's available. And it's a great collection that includes some documentary, includes feature. And out of that came my idea to make a documentary that then became a series of documentary episodes on, as the title suggests, the, shall we say, positive impacts of the COVID crisis. So with this setback of, okay, I can't work, I got to stay at home, I can't do this, I can't do that, and there's this looming threat of, don't catch it. What kind of impact does that have on me as a person or on an institution, say a nonprofit? And what kind of creative responses, if somebody is inclined to respond that way, rather than just, sit back and start binge watching Netflix, and there's nothing wrong with that. But so that was the starting point, really. And then I went and looked again under the circumstances of there's limited access. You can't just show up as a filmmaker with a team and say, hey, here we are filming. So there were some interesting logistics, as many other filmmakers and teams had to, tackle, as to how do we film with social distancing in place? How do we film with masks on? How do we, even get people to work with us and allow us to come? So the us became often just me. I've worked as a reporter in the past back in Berlin. So I'm sort of trained in this video journalism world where the team is you are the producer, you're the director, you're the camera person and the sound person. It's not great. It's not my preferred way of working because it brings some limitations sometimes, say for camera work, you can't, you hit record and then, you have to ask questions. So, but it worked, and for some of these situations, that was actually the way to go because you just can't be there with a team. Mm-hmm. And so that was an interesting process to film this.
Oh, and in this, in your documentary, you have 6 short stories that you're telling about how COVID has created change for good. Well, yes. or in a positive way. I don't want to say it's good, but it brings more humanity into what we need to do to take care of people, and the unique situations that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
So what was, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, are you asking about the episodes and some
Yeah.
specifics of?
Do you have a favorite? I know that's hard because they all are good stories, but
Yeah.
was there a favorite one that stood out to you?
Well, everybody's favorite who watched it was the first one called Drive-By Birthday,
Oh,
which is, a heartwarming story about a wonderful young man by the name of Smith Sondagger, who is the autistic son to a friend of mine or a friend of a friend. And they have been supporting him anyway pre-COVID in a way that is just amazing. He's fully functioning, he has a job, he has a girlfriend, he plays the piano. Talk about handicapped. What do you mean handicapped?
right.
He's a young man living with this condition, and that's already the end of talking about the condition. The rest is him being, just a really nice person. And so it was his birthday, and they said, well, we love this guy and we can't have a birthday, so let's have a drive-by birthday. And that became the Saturday morning that I was able to be invited to at last minute and short notice of literally hundreds of cars.
Wow.
Passing by their residence, on Spain Road in Albuquerque. It was everybody of their friends. It was his people from school. It was his people from work. It was the police department. I don't even know what the time was, why they were there, but they came by. The only thing we were missing was like fire engines. It was pretty big. And that in conjunction with his, heartwarming personality made for a great episode, showing, sort of starting with, okay, what can we do in all of what we can't do?
Right. And because I see a lot of people on social media, complain, oh, it's my birthday and nobody, I can't celebrate with anyone. And then you started seeing the ingenuity of communities coming together and supporting, especially those who are differently abled or, or ill, or house ridden or whatever. They are now, being celebrated with a simple thing like driving your car by, beeping your horn, waving, that type of thing.
Yes.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah. And that's a point I wanted to make, because there was all this, anger or at least resentment and frustration about, oh, we can't do this and we can't do that. And yes, that was true. And it still is true. And it still is not great. It is not great to not be able to go to a movie theater. It really isn't. But there's so many things we can do that are really simple. And that's, I find, a very important point to make. And that starts with, there was a plan to make an episode about one of the filmmakers in our collective who at that point was sort of going through a down time in her life anyway, personally, and then being constricted to staying at home wasn't great. And she had just moved back to Albuquerque from elsewhere. She didn't have her own place. And her creative response, rather than be frustrated, was, I am going for hikes, like for real, like every day for hours, walking, being out in nature. It was spring, it was warm, there was sunshine. And she loved those hikes, and they probably saved her, mental health at that point. And it costs nothing, and you can just do it.
Right.
So that was those kinds of simple answers to this complex question. And a drive-by birthday is one of those. And you mentioned community. I love those pictures that I saw also online of neighbors hanging out in driveways in their, beach chairs, socially distanced 6 feet apart, but they're still having a beer together and they're still having the chat that they usually have. Right. There was this picture that I now recall of high school teenagers that are already driving. So they're past 15, so they have a tailgate picnic somewhere with all the backs of the cars parked towards each other, distanced, out in the open, but they're having that get together that you need to have. Right. So yes, it was and is possible.
Right. And as you point out, simple things. Having moved from Los Angeles, where it takes an hour to drive 1 mile, during the beginnings of the pandemic, when everyone was home, we would drive around Albuquerque and there was no traffic, and we would complain, we have to wait for a red light. It just got funny, as a joke for the family, because it was so different, and we
Yeah.
rejoiced in no traffic, just as one simple thing. Sadly, it was because of, the pandemic, but it also was something that was positive, right?
Yes.
Not that we
I
have
tried.
traffic here.
I try to keep that spirit, COVID or not, every time in downtown Albuquerque when it takes 3 minutes to find a parking spot, and then it costs $1 to park, or the parking meters are free again
Right.
because they don't work, or it's a Saturday or something like that. It's like, oh my God, thinking of a real city and the $35 it costs you to
Right.
park somewhere, for an hour, and the 2 hours it takes you to find that spot. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely. And yeah, it is a matter of perspective. And again, this is not about saying, oh, it's not so bad. It's actually really bad.
Mhm.
And we're still not through this. It's still going on. So by the way, it is also a work in progress since it's episodic. I had to put it aside for a while in the fall, but now in the new year, I've put fiscal sponsorship in place to be able to work with grants and donors. And by the way, a big mention of the New Mexico Film Foundation, who is the fiscal sponsor and who is in a process, or they have revamped that whole process, and it's just amazing. So if you need fiscal sponsorship as a director, filmmaker, work with them. They're just
Wonderful.
great. And speaking of simple, it's a simple process. The onboarding is just fine, and they've already in those short, this is only a few weeks ago, have helped with the project otherwise. So you suddenly feel, oh, it's not just about accounting. I have a production partner on board.
Right.
So there are more episodes planned. The next one will be about the vaccinations that are underway now, since that's the big thing that's happening right now. That looking into the future, a year from now, will be history, so to speak.
Right.
So I'm in the process of getting the permits and identifying where I will go to cover that. And then there's more personal stories planned. So it'll continue, and I'm looking at placing it as for a television broadcast or on an online platform. So far, the Santa Fe Film Festival, thank you Santa Fe Film Festival, is the first and only festival appearance, which is great. So this is a work in progress.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we thank you for your time today, and thank you for entering your project into the Santa Fe Film Festival, because I'm sure that it's also going to give people a chance to think about how they think about what we're facing with the pandemic, and to stay positive, and to look for ways to, stay mentally healthy and support those in the community that have it harder, because there's a greater percentage of those folks not being seen, their stories not being told. And we appreciate you taking this point of view for this project, because I think that's very impactful, and I can't wait to see more.
Wonderful. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's another very important aspect of this. It is exactly this shift of perspective that, documentary likes to do that. And I'm fully in line, stories that we don't see when we look at the headlines.
Right. Exactly. Perfect. Thank you again. And we want everyone to visit Santa Fe Film Festival's website, get tickets for the festival, which starts tonight and goes through the 21st of February. Thank you so much. And we'll see you in the movies.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.